Maya Daniels stood at the base of the overgrown path, her 2 suitcases heavy in her hands, the third weight, her unborn child, pressing against her ribs. 7 months pregnant, broke, and utterly alone, she had nowhere else to go. The old farmhouse loomed on the hill like a memory that refused to fade. Its paint hung in brittle flakes, the porch sagged under its own weight, and the fields beyond it stretched wild and untended, as though time itself had decided to move on without this place. The letter in her pocket was creased from the number of times she'd unfolded it, reread it, and wondered if it was a mistake. To Ms. Maya Daniels, sole heir to the estate of Ms. Ida Mae Johnson, an inheritance from a woman she barely remembered. Her great-aunt, a peppermint and a smile from decades ago. Now, with her belly full of life and her heart hollowed by loss, this crumbling house was all she had left. Before we dive deeper, imagine if this were your story. Hit that like button if it moves you. Share your thoughts in the comments on what you'd do in her shoes, and spread this tale if it resonates. If you are new to this channel, click on the subscribe button now, and ensure you watch this story to the end. This is a story that you can't miss a second of. Let's ride on. She reached the porch. The wind whispered through the tall grass, and somewhere in the distance a screen door slammed, though the town lay miles away. Maya fit the old brass key into the lock and turned it. The door opened with a long, reluctant sigh, like the house had been holding its breath for her return. The air inside was cool and musty. Wallpaper peeled in curling ribbons. A faded portrait of a woman watched from the hallway, her eyes catching the light from the open door. "Guess it's just you and me, little one," Maya whispered, rubbing her belly. As dusk deepened into night, she spread her blanket across the wooden floor and lay listening to the creaks of the house. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't sleeping in her car. But comfort didn't come easily. Somewhere above her, a single, slow thud broke the silence. Then another, and another. Maya's eyes flew open. She sat up, heart pounding. The sound stopped. Only wind and the chirp of crickets filled the space again. "Just the house settling," she whispered, but her voice trembled. When dawn came, sunlight sliced through the shutters, illuminating something she hadn't noticed before. Small, bare footprints in the layer of dust near the stairs. They led toward the attic door. 3 months earlier, Maya's life had been all glass towers and open houses. Atlanta had felt limitless then. Commissions, city lights, a man who promised forever. Until forever packed its bags and left. David's absence had been like a rip through the fabric of her life. One she hadn't had the time or strength to mend. His words still echoed some nights. "This isn't what I signed up for." Now, in the pale light of morning, the echoes were different. The settling creaks of an old farmhouse, the hum of cicadas, the occasional groan of wood as if the walls themselves remembered too much. Maya sat up on her blanket, the air cool against her skin. For a moment she stayed still, listening. The silence felt heavy, but not threatening. Just old. "House noises," she said aloud, her voice cracking the stillness. "You're just an old place getting used to company again." Her hand drifted to her stomach. "And we're getting used to you too, little one." The baby gave a soft flutter, as if in reply. Maya smiled. "See? We're fine. Everything's fine." She began her first real day at the Johnson place armed with nothing but a broom, a roll of trash bags, and stubborn determination. The kitchen was a time capsule. Dishes stacked beside a porcelain sink, a yellowed calendar frozen in 1998. Dust motes danced through slanted sunlight as she opened cabinets. Behind a stack of chipped plates, she found an old photograph wrapped in wax paper. In it, 3 women stood side by side, all dark-skinned, proud and unflinching, their Sunday hats tilted just so. One of them, she realized, looked hauntingly familiar. The same high cheekbones, the same stubborn chin. "Ida May," Maya whispered. "I think that's you." She found more as the day went on. Faces of children holding tin lunch pails, men with calloused hands, women in pressed cotton dresses standing before the same house she now stood in. Each photo told her something she'd never been taught. Her family hadn't just survived here. They had built something. By midday, sweat streaked her neck, and she sat on the porch steps to catch her breath. The letter from the lawyer rested beside her. She unfolded it again, tracing the crisp typewritten lines. The estate of Ms. Ida May Johnson, deceased, bequeaths all holdings, personal and financial, to Ms. Maya Daniels, her great-niece and sole living heir. Further down, a brief note scrawled by the lawyer's assistant. No known next of kin. Ms. Johnson died alone on the property in 2001. Alone, Maya murmured. The word lingered like dust. She'd known loneliness these past months, the kind that came from empty apartments, unanswered texts, and sleeping in parking lots. But to die that way, with no one to remember your name until a lawyer tracked down a distant niece. Maya felt a chill. She pushed herself up, ready to keep busy. The more she cleaned, the less her mind wandered to what-ifs and used-to-bes. In the pantry, she found something that didn't fit the timeline. Cans of beans and soup, none more than a year old. A box of matches. 2 half-burned candles. Someone had been here recently. Her breath quickened. Maybe the lawyer, she muttered. But she knew better. There'd been no mention of anyone else having keys. Then she saw it. A yellow sticky note pressed crookedly to the refrigerator door. The handwriting was shaky but deliberate. "Don't go in the cellar." Her pulse stumbled. "What?" she whispered. She stared at the note until her nerves burned out. Finally, she peeled it free, folded it, and tucked it into her pocket. Probably just a prank. Old houses have basements. Big deal. But the words clung to her mind like cobwebs. That evening, she ate a sandwich on the back steps while the sun slid down behind the trees. The house glowed amber in the fading light. The fields were still, peaceful even. Yet the air carried a strange expectancy, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Maya rubbed her belly again, thinking of David, of how easily he'd turned away when she told him she was pregnant. His family hadn't been subtle about their opinions either. They'd liked her when she was his pretty black girlfriend from the city, not when she became a reminder of the boundaries they pretended didn't exist. Now she was carrying their bloodline, half him, half her, and though she wouldn't trade her child for anything, the thought of raising a biracial baby in a small Alabama town made her chest tighten. "I'll protect you," she whispered, "no matter what people think." The baby rolled gently, a quiet reassurance. She headed back inside, where the air had cooled and the scent of old paper seemed stronger. While sweeping the hallway, her broom struck something hollow beneath a loose floorboard. She knelt and pried it up. Inside the narrow gap was a small bundle wrapped in faded cloth. Inside that, a stack of envelopes bound with twine. Letters, their edges browned with age. Maya carried them to the table and carefully untied the string. The top envelope was addressed in neat cursive. "To my sister, Ruth." Her grandmother. She unfolded the first page. The ink was fading, but the words were still clear. The land remembers, Ruth. They keep trying to take it, but we must hold on. This place holds more than soil. It holds us. Don't let them take it again. Maya sat frozen, the paper trembling in her hands. Outside, a breeze rustled through the trees, a low whisper that slipped through the cracks of the old farmhouse. For the first time, it didn't sound like loneliness. It sounded like someone, or something, remembering. The wind whispered through the cracked shutters, carrying the faint scent of rain and earth. Maya sat at the kitchen table, Ida May's letter still open in front of her. The words had kept her awake most of the night. The land remembers. She hadn't slept much. Every creak and sigh of the old farmhouse had pressed against her nerves until dawn finally broke pale and uncertain across the fields. By mid-morning, her stomach reminded her she had nothing left to eat but stale bread and a single jar of peanut butter. "All right, baby," she said, patting her belly. "Let's see what town's got." The road into Cypress Hollow wound through pine and red clay, the kind of backroad that seemed to twist through history itself. When the town came into view, it looked frozen in a half-remembered decade. An old courthouse, a diner with a flickering neon sign, a general store advertising live bait and groceries. Maya parked near the corner store, brushing her curls from her face as she stepped out. Immediately she felt it, the eyes. A few men by a truck fell silent. A woman carrying a laundry basket slowed, just enough to stare before hurrying inside. The air felt heavier than the humidity. Maya held her head high and walked toward the store. She'd learned long ago that confidence was armor, even when it was paper thin. Inside, the bell over the door jingled. The scent of dust and motor oil mixed with coffee and fried chicken from the back counter. The man at the register, maybe in his 70s, looked up. His face softened with something like recognition. "You must be Ida May's people," he said. His voice was rough but not unkind. "Didn't think I'd ever see another Johnson walk through that door." Maya blinked. "You knew her?" He nodded, wiping his hands on a rag. "Name's Elijah Reed. Used to fix Miss Ida May's old Ford back, when she could still drive herself into town. Lord, that woman was something fierce." Maya smiled faintly. "That sounds about right." Elijah studied her for a long moment, his gaze traveling from her face to the gentle curve of her belly. "You stayin' out at the Johnson place?" "Yes, sir. Just got there yesterday." He leaned on the counter, lowering his voice. "That land carries weight, child. Folks here never forgot what was buried under it." The way he said buried made her pulse skip. "Buried? You mean family history?" "History, yes," Elijah said slowly. "But also other things. People used to say Ida May's daddy built that house over holy ground. Some called it cursed. Depends on who you ask." Maya forced a small laugh. "Guess I'll take my chances with a curse if it comes with a roof." Elijah smiled at that, though his eyes stayed serious. "Maybe. But some ghosts don't stay buried. And some ain't ghosts at all. If you hear things, best keep your lights on." She wanted to ask more, but another customer entered, and the moment broke. Elijah nodded toward the shelves. "Milk's in the back. Try the diner for a real meal. Tell Millie I said hey." The diner sat across from the courthouse, its windows fogged from the fryer grease inside. Maya slid into a booth by the window, ignoring the sidelong glances from two older women at the counter. The waitress, a petite woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read Millie, approached with a cautious smile. "You're new around here," Millie said, pouring her coffee before she could ask. "Just moved into my great-aunt's place, the Johnson farmhouse." Millie's hand froze mid-paw. Lord have mercy, that old place. She glanced around before leaning closer. You be careful out there. Folks say lights still flicker in the windows at night. Been that way since Miss Ida May passed. Like she's still walking those halls. Maya forced a smile, though a shiver crept up her spine. I'll keep that in mind. Millie straightened quickly when another customer called for her, leaving Maya alone with her thoughts. Outside, as she paid and stepped toward her car, the reflection in the glass caught her attention. A black SUV parked across the street. Inside, a man in a suit sat behind the wheel, watching her. Not just glancing, watching. She turned fully, pretending to check her phone, but by the time she looked up again, the SUV had pulled away. Her pulse thudded in her ears. Maybe it was nothing. Or maybe the small-town silence wasn't as peaceful as it seemed. When she returned home, the sun had dipped low, painting the sky with the deep orange of fading heat. Elijah's warning replayed in her head as she carried her groceries up the porch steps. Some ghosts don't stay buried, and some ain't ghosts at all. She unpacked quietly, the floorboards groaning beneath her feet like the house was listening. The air smelled faintly of rain and something else. Damp wood, maybe, or earth turned freshly over. She ate standing at the counter, listening to the steady tick of the kitchen clock. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling a loose shutter. Then, from somewhere deep below the house, came a sound. A scrape. A hollow, dragging scrape, like wood against stone. Maya froze, her fork suspended halfway to her mouth. It came again, softer this time. Then silence. She glanced toward the door leading to the cellar, the same one she'd promised herself not to open. Her hand trembled as she reached for the light switch. Just the wind, she whispered. But the house didn't agree. It exhaled, a low, shuddering breath from somewhere beneath her feet. And the refrigerator hum faltered, like the whole place had paused to listen. For a long moment, Maya stood frozen, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the still air. Then, that too fell silent. The entire house seemed to hold its breath. The sound from below had stopped, but the weight of it lingered, that dragging, scraping echo lodged somewhere deep in her mind. Maya's fingers tightened around the counter edge. It's nothing, she whispered, but even she didn't believe it. When she finally moved, it was slow, deliberate. She turned on every light in the kitchen, then crossed to the small hallway beside the pantry, the one that ended at a narrow, locked door she hadn't yet tried to open. The cellar door. She'd avoided it since finding that note. Don't go in the cellar. But now, standing in the soft hum of electric light, she couldn't look away. The brass handle glinted faintly, almost expectant. Maya reached for the ring of keys she'd been keeping in a bowl on the counter, old, tarnished things that had come with the house. She thumbed through them until one caught the light differently. A small brass key etched with the initials IMJ. Ida May Johnson, she murmured. It fit perfectly. The lock turned with a reluctant click, and the door creaked open, releasing a draft of cool, damp air that smelled faintly of soil and iron. Her skin prickled. She hesitated only a second before grabbing her flashlight from the counter. You've come this far, she told herself, and the child that pressed gently against her ribs. We're not running from shadows. The stairs descended steeply, wood groaning under her weight. Each step took her deeper into the cold. Water dripped somewhere unseen, echoing in slow, rhythmic intervals. At the bottom, the beam of her flashlight swept across the dirt floor and rough stone walls. It wasn't what she'd expected. There were no cobwebs, no piles of forgotten junk, Only a narrow tunnel stretching ahead, reinforced with old timbers darkened by age. Her breath came out in a pale cloud. "How far does this go?" she whispered. She started forward, one hand trailing the wall. That's when she felt it, grooves carved into the stone. She angled her light closer. Initials. Dozens of them. Dates. Symbols. A simple cross. A 5-pointed star. Handprints, small, large, layered over one another, pressed into the earth like a message written by time itself. Her chest tightened. These weren't random scratches. They were marks of passage. "Lord," she breathed. "What is this place?" The tunnel sloped gently downward until the beam of her flashlight caught something ahead, metal glinting dully through the dust. It was a door. Iron, thick and scarred with rust, its edges swallowed by tree roots that had broken through the earth above. Across its center, carved in deep, careful letters, were the words, "Sanctuary 1863. Her heart pounded. "Sanctuary," she read aloud, the word heavy with meaning. With trembling fingers, she pressed against the handle. It resisted at first, then gave with a groan that echoed through the tunnel. The door swung inward. The air inside was colder still, and astonishingly clean. The space beyond wasn't a room so much as a hidden chamber, carved into the stone and meticulously arranged. Maya stepped inside and gasped. Along the walls stood shelves lined with jars sealed in wax. Inside some were folded papers, others held seeds or dried herbs. A row of oil lamps sat beside a wooden table covered in old ledgers and carefully bound journals. At the far end, a single chair faced an altar-like niche where a Bible rested beneath glass. A candle stub lay beside it, long burned out. Maya moved toward one of the ledgers, brushing away dust from the cover. The handwriting inside was elegant and precise. Record of arrivals, 1863. She turned a page. Names. Dozens of them. Families. Men and women. Children. Each marked safe. Her hand flew to her mouth. The Johnson place wasn't just a farmhouse. It had been a safe house. A link in the Underground Railroad. Tears welled in her eyes as realization flooded through her. Her ancestors hadn't simply lived on this land. They had protected it, using the tunnels beneath to shelter those fleeing bondage. The weight Elijah had spoken of, this was it. On the next shelf sat a locked chest, its wood dark with age. She hesitated before prying the lid open. Inside were folded deeds stamped with an official government seal. She lifted one carefully into the light. Property title, Johnson Estate Holdings, Cypress Hollow District. There were dozens of them, each naming parcels of land surrounding the town, land that now belonged to the timber company. Maya sank to her knees, the papers trembling in her hands. For generations, her family had owned half of Cypress Hollow, and somewhere along the line it had been stolen, buried, and forgotten. Her throat tightened. Ida May, you knew. The truth unfurled like a map before her. The isolation, the warnings, the secrecy. Her great-aunt hadn't been a recluse. She'd been a guardian. Maya sat there for a long time, breathing in the cold air of the past. A deep, swelling pride filled her chest, mingled with sorrow and rage. She had come here broken, abandoned, looking for shelter. What she'd found instead was a legacy, one built on courage and survival. Her hand drifted instinctively to her stomach. "This is yours too," she whispered to her unborn child. "You come from fighters." For the first time in months, she felt anchored, not to a man, not to a city, but to something older, something unshakable. She stood slowly, flashlight trembling in her grip, ready to head back toward the stairs. But just as she turned, a sound rippled through the silence. Soft. Close. A whisper. Her name. Maya. It drifted from somewhere deep in the tunnel, low and breathless. Her blood ran cold. The flashlight flickered once, then steadied. Maya. This time it was clearer. A woman's voice, familiar somehow, carried on the air like an echo from another century. Maya's pulse pounded in her ears. She took a step backward, then another, until her shoulder met the cold iron of the door. The whisper faded, leaving only the steady drip of water and the thudding of her own heartbeat. "Ida May," she whispered. Silence. Then, faintly, a single candle flame flared to life on the table. The candle burned itself out sometime before dawn, but Maya hadn't dared move. Even when the flame died, the faint glow seemed to linger, as if Ida May herself refused to leave her in the dark. By morning, sunlight streamed weakly through the kitchen window, the kind that didn't warm, but only revealed how much dust still lingered in the air. Maya sat at the table, the old deed spread before her, trying to steady her shaking hands. Everything she'd seen in that tunnel pressed at the edges of her thoughts. Sanctuary 1863, the names, the ledgers, the whispers. Her family's history had been buried under other people's greed, and she had a feeling those people weren't entirely gone. The sound of tires crunching on gravel broke her reverie. She looked up to see a black SUV glide to a stop outside the porch. The shine of the vehicle looked out of place against the weathered farmhouse, like a vulture perching on a dying tree. A tall man stepped out. Mid-40s, neatly pressed suit, smile practiced to perfection. He adjusted his cufflinks before calling out, "Ms. Daniels?" Maya's gut tightened. She opened the door halfway, her fingers still smudged with dirt and dust from the cellar. "Can I help you?" "Thomas Ward," he said smoothly, flashing a business card. "Cypress Timber Holdings. We're overseeing the redevelopment of this area. I heard you've taken up residence here at the Johnson property." Maya frowned. "Redevelopment? This land isn't for sale." Ward's smile didn't falter. "Of course not yet. But you see, there's been some confusion in the county archives. Ownership records from the early 1900s are, let's say, incomplete. My company has a claim that overlaps with your deed." "Overlaps?" Maya folded her arms. "Or you mean you're trying to take what doesn't belong to you?" He chuckled lightly, a sound as thin as paper. "No one's taking anything, Ms. Daniels. We're merely offering a generous solution. You've inherited a property that, frankly, is in disrepair. Maintaining it will be costly, but I can make it worth your while." He pulled an envelope from his jacket and set it on the porch railing. "A preliminary offer. Enough to start fresh anywhere you like." Maya didn't touch it. "You think I came all the way here to sell the one thing my family left behind?" His gaze flicked briefly to her stomach. "You're expecting, aren't you? I'm only suggesting what's best for you and your child. A safe home, a secure future." Something inside her flared, sharp and protective. "We're fine right here." Ward's expression cooled, the charm draining from his voice. "Be careful, Ms. Daniels. These old houses, they don't last. Accidents happen. Fires. Collapses. You'd be wise not to let sentiment blind you to practicality." Maya stepped back, her pulse hammering. "You need to leave." He inclined his head slightly, as if humoring a child. "Think about it," he said, then turned and strolled to his car. Gravel spit beneath his tires as he drove off, leaving only a swirl of red dust in his wake. That evening, the air was heavy and restless, clouds stacking low on the horizon. Maya couldn't shake the unease that clung to her. Every shadow seemed to watch. She called Elijah, telling him about Ward's visit. He cursed softly. That man's trouble. His daddy ran the same company back in my day. They've been trying to get that land for decades. Why? Maya asked. Because there's money under it. Timber, minerals, take your pick. But they can't build nothing until they erase the Johnson name. You hang tight here? I'll come by tomorrow morning. After she hung up, Maya double-checked every lock on the doors and windows. She pulled the curtains tight, leaving only the soft hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock for company. By midnight, the storm had rolled in. Lightning flashed through the slats of the shutters. She was just drifting toward uneasy sleep when movement outside caught her eye. Through the narrow gap in the curtain, she saw lights, several of them, moving across the field. Flashlights. Her chest seized. She turned off the lamp and crouched near the window. The beams of light bobbed closer to the barn, weaving between the trees. She could make out dark shapes, men, maybe 3 or 4. Not tonight, she whispered, heart pounding. She reached for her phone and dialed Elijah. Before he could answer, the world outside exploded. A burst of orange tore through the night, followed by a thunderous roar. The barn was a sheet of fire, sparks leaping skyward like 1,000 angry spirits. Maya stumbled backward as the heat reached the house, searing her face through the glass. No, no, no! She grabbed the nearest blanket, soaked it in the sink, and ran to the porch, covering her mouth against the smoke. The wind carried the flames sideways, embers raining like fireflies. She could hear something popping, the sound of paint cans or trapped air bursting inside. She backed away, coughing violently, one arm wrapped around her stomach. By the time the volunteer fire trucks arrived, the barn was nothing but a smoking skeleton. Elijah came soon after, his face drawn tight with worry. "You all right?" he asked, gripping her shoulder. "I'm fine," she rasped. "The baby's fine. But that wasn't an accident." The sheriff disagreed. A broad man with a weathered face, he shook his head as he took notes under the harsh glare of the floodlights. "Lightning must have hit it," he said. "Old drywood'll go up in seconds." "There wasn't lightning yet," Maya shot back. "And I saw people out there." He sighed, like a teacher humoring a child. "You've had a scare, ma'am. We'll look into it." But she could see it in his eyes. He wouldn't. When they finally left, dawn was bleeding pale light over the smoking ruins. Elijah stood beside her in the damp grass, his voice low. "You see now, girl? They don't want you here." Maya's gaze fixed on the charred remains of the barn. "Then they should have burned the house too," she said quietly. "Because I'm not leaving until I know what they were so desperate to hide." The barn still smoked 3 days later. Every morning, Maya stood by the ruins, breathing in the acrid scent of charred wood and earth, and every morning she grew more certain it hadn't been an accident. The sheriff's report had been brief, almost dismissive. No evidence of foul play. She'd thrown it in the trash, because she knew better. The fire had been meant to erase something, just like the company men, just like the county records that had been lost decades ago. Now she was determined to find out what. That afternoon, as the sun blazed low, she grabbed a shovel and stepped into the ashes. The ground was soft and blackened, smoke still rising from the wreckage. She coughed against the smell and began to dig, her boots sinking into the wet soil. She worked until the shovel struck something hard. Kneeling, she brushed aside the debris and revealed a flat slab of stone. Beneath it, wedged tightly into the dirt, was a small metal box streaked with soot and rust. Her pulse quickened. It took both hands and a rock to pry it loose. The lid groaned as it opened, and a gust of trapped air escaped, carrying the scent of paper and time. Inside were neatly bound folders, edges singed but intact. On the top, written in faded ink, Cypress County Courthouse Records, 1921. Maya flipped one open, her breath catching as she read. Transfer of ownership. Johnson Estate Holdings to Cypress Timber Company. Witnessed by Harlan Pierce, County Clerk. Below the signatures, in faint pencil, someone had written, "Forgery. Never signed by R. Johnson." Her hands trembled as she turned the page. Dozens more documents told the same story. Property titles, deeds, legal complaints, all bearing the Johnson family's name. And each one proved the same thing. Their land hadn't been sold. It had been stolen. She sank back on her heels, her heart pounding. "They took everything," she whispered. And then she saw it. A smaller envelope tucked at the bottom, sealed with wax and marked in Ida May's steady hand. "To whoever finds this, they erased us with paper, but I saved the truth. If they burned me, may this outlast the fire." Maya's throat tightened. "You did it, Ida May," she murmured. "You kept it safe." By dusk, she was on Elijah's porch, clutching the box like it was sacred. He listened silently as she laid the documents before him. The flicker of his porch light cast deep lines across his weathered face. "Well, I'll be damned," he said softly. She had the proof all along. Maya nodded. She was trying to fight them, but no one listened. Elijah rubbed a hand over his jaw. They wouldn't. Not back then. Folks who spoke up about things like this had a way of disappearing. He sat back, eyes narrowing. "We can't keep this to ourselves. I know someone, used to write for the Birmingham Ledger. Name's Carla Henderson. She'll know what to do." The next day, Elijah drove her into town. Carla was a black woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a voice that carried authority. She listened carefully as Maya told her everything. The deeds, the tunnel, the threats. Carla flipped through the documents. "If this is real, and it looks real, it's bigger than a family dispute. This could expose a century of fraud. I'll contact a lawyer I trust in Montgomery." Maya exhaled. For the first time, hope felt tangible. But by the time she returned home that evening, the air around the farmhouse felt different, heavier charged. The porch light flickered as she approached. An envelope lay tucked under the door. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed in block letters. "Accidents happen. Sell while you can." Maya's hands went cold. She tore the note in half, then again, but the words burned in her mind. She picked up her phone to call Elijah. Nothing. No dial tone. She checked the line outside. Cut clean through. Her chest tightened. They were here. The next morning, her tires were slashed. By the third night, every sound in the house felt amplified. The creak of the floorboards, the distant hoot of an owl, the hum of the refrigerator cutting out at odd intervals. Even the wind sounded like whispers now. She slept with the flashlight by her bed, the box of documents locked in the trunk of her car. On the fourth day, she met Carla again at the diner. The journalist's expression was grim. "The lawyer confirmed it. The deeds are legitimate. If we can match the signatures, you can challenge their claim in court." "That's what they're afraid of," Maya said. Carla nodded. And they should be. But you need to be careful, Maya. When people's money's on the line, especially old money, they don't play fair. Maya drove home with her windows rolled up, her eyes scanning the tree line for movement. Every mile of road felt like a question she couldn't answer. How far would they go to silence her? When she reached the property, the sun was already sinking, painting the fields in bruised gold. She parked beside the barn ruins and stepped out, the smell of ash still thick in the air. The farmhouse stood behind her, silent and waiting. Maya walked to the edge of the burned foundation, the shovel still half buried where she'd left it. Smoke rose faintly from the blackened ground, curling into the fading light. She knelt, touching the charred earth. "You tried to bury us once," she said softly, voice trembling with rage. "But not again." The wind stirred, carrying the faint scent of pine and soot. "I won't let them take it again," she whispered, louder this time. Her hand drifted to her belly, the faint flutter of life steadying her. "Not from me. Not from her." Behind her, the old house groaned, a deep, settling sound, almost like approval. For the first time since the fire, she didn't feel afraid. Only ready. The next morning dawned grey and restless, the kind of sky that made everything look washed out and weary. Maya stood on the porch with a mug of coffee gone cold in her hands, staring across the field at the blackened skeleton of the barn. The smell of smoke still lingered, stubborn and sour. Elijah's truck pulled into the driveway, tires crunching over gravel. He climbed out slowly, his hat pulled low, his eyes carrying the same heaviness as the sky. "Morning," he said. Maya managed a nod. "Any news?" He sighed, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "I had a word with Sheriff Dunn. Thought maybe I could shake him into seeing sense." "And?" Elijah hesitated. "Turns out, Cypress Timber Holdings belongs to the Pierce family." The name made her freeze. Pierce, like the clerk from the records? The one who forged the signatures? "The very same line," Elijah said grimly. "Been in business under different names for 100 years. Their granddaddies stole this land, and their grandsons are still spending the profit." Maya's stomach turned. "So Ward works for them?" "More than that," Elijah said quietly. "Word is, he's married into them. The fire, the threats, it's the same story playing out all over again. Only difference is, they didn't count on you finding proof." Maya gripped the porch rail, trying to steady herself. "Elijah, did you ever meet Ida May?" "Toward the end." He looked away. "I did. She came to see me once, just before she passed. Said she was fixing to file another claim. Had new papers, new witnesses. A week later, they found her in that house. Sheriff said heart failure, but you didn't believe it." He shook his head. "It wasn't right, Maya. None of it was." A cold wind swept across the yard, rattling the porch steps. Maya glanced toward the cellar door, half hidden in shadow beneath the house. "I need to see something," she said. "One more time." The tunnel felt colder than before, as if the house itself knew what she was searching for. Her flashlight flickered across the carved walls, tracing the initials and handprints of those who had once found safety here. When she reached the chamber, everything was as she had left it. The ledgers, the sealed jars, the faint scent of earth and candle wax. But something tugged at her attention, a soft glimmer near the altar. The Bible. It lay where she had first seen it, beneath the cracked glass. This time she lifted it carefully, its leather cover brittle with age. As she turned the pages, something slipped loose and fell to the floor, a folded letter sealed with red wax. Her heart quickened as she broke it open. My dearest child, if you are reading this, then the house has found you. They took the land, child, but not its spirit. The proof is buried, and so is the sin. I could not cleanse what was done, but I can guard what was left. Trust the ground beneath your feet. It remembers. Ida May. Maya pressed the letter to her chest. Tears stung her eyes. You knew this would happen, she whispered. You knew I'd come. The flashlight flickered again. For a moment, she thought she heard something. A faint shuffle, a distant creak from above. Then she realized it wasn't from above. It was from behind. She spun toward the tunnel entrance, her pulse thundering. The beam of light caught the faint outline of boots, several pairs, descending the cellar steps. The first voice came low, familiar, cruelly calm. Miss Daniels, Thomas Ward called. You've made this much harder than it had to be. Her blood ran cold. She doused the flashlight and pressed herself into the shadows. You've got something that doesn't belong to you, he said, his voice echoing off the stone. Those papers. Hand them over, and this can still end easy. Maya clutched the Bible to her chest, the letter tucked safely inside. Her other hand rested on her stomach, where her baby stirred as if sensing her fear. Footsteps scraped closer. Flashlights cut through the dark, sweeping over the tunnel walls, illuminating the carvings. One beam passed just inches from her face. She took a slow breath, then backed deeper into the sanctuary chamber, silent except for the pounding of her heart. Ward's voice drew nearer. This is your last chance. A distant sound cut him off, the sharp growl of an engine on gravel, followed by the slam of a truck door. Then another sound, the metallic click of a shotgun being cocked. Elijah, Maya whispered, relief surging through her chest. From above came the heavy stomp of boots, the sheriff's voice barking. Ward, step away from that door. The tunnel erupted in chaos. Ward cursed. One of his men shouted, They're here. A flashlight clattered to the ground, rolling, its beam spinning wildly across the walls. Maya crouched low, covering her ears as the shouts echoed, bouncing off the stone. She could hear scuffling, a grunt, then the thud of someone hitting the floorboards above. Moments later, the cellar door burst open again. Elijah's voice called out, rough and breathless. Maya, you down there? She stood shakily, clutching the Bible. Here. He appeared in the tunnel entrance, flashlight in one hand, shotgun in the other. Behind him, the sheriff dragged one of Ward's men up the stairs in cuffs. But Ward himself was already retreating, slipping through the side door toward his SUV. Maya followed Elijah outside, the wind whipping through her hair as she shouted after him. Why Ward? Why my family? Ward paused beside his car, his face half lit by the porch light. For the first time, his charm faltered. Because your great-aunt wouldn't sell, he said, voice cold. And people who hold up progress don't last long around here. Then he was gone, taillights vanishing down the dirt road. Maya stood in the driveway, trembling, Ida May's Bible clutched tight against her chest. The sheriff was already talking into his radio, calling for backup, but all Maya could hear was the echo of Ward's words. People who hold up progress don't last long. Elijah stepped beside her, his hand firm on her shoulder. He just signed his own confession, girl. And we're gonna make damn sure the world hears it. Maya looked toward the horizon, where dawn was breaking again, this time brighter, fiercer. Then let's finish what Ida May started. By the end of the week, the quiet town of Cypress Hollow wasn't quiet anymore. News vans lined the courthouse steps. Reporters crowded the sidewalks, microphones thrust forward, cameras flashing under the sharp Alabama sun. For the first time in generations, the name Johnson wasn't being whispered in fear. It was being spoken aloud, printed in headlines, and broadcast across the country. Cypress Timber Holdings under investigation for century-old land fraud. Black family's legacy unearthed in historic Alabama case. The truth was out. It started with Ward's words, caught cleanly on Elijah's phone the night he fled. "Your great-aunt died because she wouldn't sell." That single sentence had ripped the lid off decades of corruption. The sheriff, red-faced but resolute, turned the evidence over to the state. Within days, investigators descended on Cypress Timber's headquarters like a swarm. Boxes of falsified deeds, doctored surveys, and hidden bank ledgers emerged, each one proving what Ida May had always known. The company had built its empire on theft. Ward was arrested trying to leave the state. The Pierces, the same family whose ancestors had stolen the Johnson land in 1921, were charged with conspiracy and fraud. And Maya? She was no longer just the pregnant woman living in the old house. She was the face of something larger, justice reclaimed from the ashes. On the morning of the hearing, Maya stood before the mirror in the courthouse restroom, smoothing the front of her navy dress. Her belly curved proudly beneath the fabric. She hadn't tried to hide it, she wanted them to see. She took a deep breath, hearing Elijah's words in her head. "You carry more than one life in you, girl. You carry history." When she stepped into the courtroom, the crowd hushed. Her lawyer, Carla's contact from Montgomery, gave her a reassuring nod as they took their seats. Across the aisle sat Ward and the remaining board members of Cypress Timber, pale and tight-lipped. The judge, an older black woman with silver hair and a gaze like tempered steel, adjusted her glasses. "Let's begin." The hearing stretched on for hours. Evidence presented, testimonies read, lies unraveled one by one. Maya spoke near the end, her voice steady but raw. She told them about Ida May, about the letters, the tunnel, the records buried under the barn. She spoke of her family's pride and the pain of seeing it erased. And she spoke of her unborn child, a new branch growing from an old root that refused to die. When she finished, there was silence, the kind that settles like reverence, not doubt. The judge leaned forward, her voice deliberate. "The court finds that the Johnson estate was unlawfully deprived of its holdings through falsified documents and racial intimidation. Effective immediately, the deeds to all relevant parcels of land are hereby restored to the rightful heirs." Maya's breath caught. Around her, cameras clicked. Carla squeezed her hand, whispering, "You did it." But it wasn't triumph Maya felt first. It was release. The kind that comes when generations of silence finally end. In the days that followed, the town changed. Where there had been suspicion, there was curiosity. Where there had been neglect, there was respect. The sheriff came by the farmhouse one afternoon, hat in hand. "The state's declared the tunnel under your place a protected landmark," he told her. "They're calling it Sanctuary 1863. Ida May was right. It was part of the Underground Railroad." Maya smiled faintly. "She'd like that." He nodded. "You'll get state funding to preserve it. School tours, historical grants, all that good stuff." "Thank you," she said quietly. As he left, she looked out across the fields, now green again under the spring sun. For the first time since she'd arrived, she didn't feel like an intruder. This was home. 2 weeks later, Maya drove to the small church cemetery on the edge of town. The air smelled of honeysuckle and rain-soaked clay. A fresh stone stood beside an older, weathered one, both marked Johnson. She knelt beside Ida May's grave, the soft earth cool beneath her palms. "You fought so long," she whispered. "You tried to tell them, and they silenced you. But I promise, your fight wasn't in vain." She placed the folded copy of the court decree against the headstone, weighed it down with a smooth river stone, and smiled through her tears. "I'm going to raise her here," she said softly, resting a hand on her belly. "Right on this land. She'll know who she comes from. She'll know you." The wind stirred, gentle and warm, moving through the trees like a sigh. It brushed her cheek, and for a moment, Maya swore she heard it, a voice faint and familiar, carried on the air. "Home, child. You're home." That evening, she stood on the porch of the farmhouse, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The fields shimmered gold. The old house, once heavy with ghosts, now felt alive, its windows bright, its walls humming quietly with the sounds of renewal. Elijah's truck rattled up the drive, and he climbed out, carrying a small box. "Got something for you," he said with a grin. Inside was a hand-carved wooden sign, letters burned into the surface. "The Johnson Homestead, EST 1863. Maya's eyes filled again. "It's perfect," she whispered. Elijah nodded toward the door. "Put it where folks can see it. Let Em remember." As he drove away, Maya hung the sign beside the porch steps. The last of the day's light caught the lettering, turning it bronze. She leaned against the doorway, her hand resting on her belly as her baby stirred. "This is ours again," she whispered. And as the stars began to bloom across the deepening sky, the house settled around her, not in warning this time, but in peace. The night Maya went into labor, a soft rain fell over Cypress Hollow. The fields shimmered beneath flashes of distant lightning, and the old farmhouse stood like a sentinel against the storm, its windows glowing warm and alive. Elijah's truck skidded into the driveway just after midnight. "All right now, don't you go having that baby on these steps," he hollered as he rushed in, rain dripping from his hat. Maya laughed weakly through the pain. "Then drive faster, old man." 2 hours later, in the small-town hospital where Ida May herself had once been born, the cries of a new life filled the room. The nurse smiled as she laid the baby in Maya's arms. "A strong one," she said softly, already frightened to be heard. Maya gazed down at her daughter, smooth brown skin, dark curls damp against her forehead, tiny fists curling and uncurling with life. "Welcome home, Ida Ruth," she whispered. "Welcome back." The name felt like a circle closing. One for Ida May, who had fought to preserve their legacy. One for Ruth, Maya's grandmother, who had carried the memory but not the proof. And now, a third, a bridge to everything they had protected, and everything to come. Weeks later, the farmhouse was alive again. Children ran laughing through the yard. Volunteers hammered, painted, and planted new flowers beneath the porch. The old wood gleamed under fresh coats of white paint, and where the for sale sign once leaned in the weeds, a new one stood proudly. The Johnson Heritage Home and Sanctuary Museum, established 1863, restored 2025. The cellar, once a place of secrets, now glowed with electric light. Glass displays showcased the ledgers, letters, and jars Maya had found. Visitors came from nearby towns to learn about the Underground Railroad stop that had saved so many lives, and the black families who had built Cypress Hollow from the ground up. At the grand opening, Carla stood beside her, notebook in hand, eyes shining. You did it, she whispered. You gave history a heartbeat. Maya looked around, at the crowd of schoolchildren tracing carvings on the tunnel walls, at the plaque that read Sanctuary 1863, and at Elijah, holding baby Ida Ruth with pride and tenderness. He grinned when she caught his eye. She's got your spirit, he said. And your stubbornness, Maya teased. Good thing too, he replied. World still needs a few fighters. In time, the whispers about the haunted house on the hill faded. The people of Cypress Hollow no longer avoided it. They came to celebrate it. The Johnson place became a gathering ground for community picnics, church fundraisers, even the annual Freedom Jubilee. Folks brought pies and music, stories and laughter. The land that had once been stolen and silenced now echoed with joy. Maya often sat on the porch at dusk, Ida Ruth sleeping against her chest, and watched the fireflies blink across the fields. Sometimes she'd catch sight of a figure walking the path from the woods, Elijah, bringing tomatoes or just conversation. He'd always sit for a while, rocking quietly beside her. Your great-aunt would have been proud, he'd say. Took her whole life to plant the seeds, but you made 'em bloom. Maya would smile, watching her daughter's small hand curl around her finger. She never stopped believing, she'd answer, even when no one listened. Elijah nodded, eyes soft. That's what faith looks like, child. Sometimes it skips a generation, just waitin' for someone brave enough to carry it on. As the months passed, the farmhouse settled into a new rhythm, one of life, not loss. The nights that had once frightened her now comforted her. The familiar creaks in the floorboards felt like whispers of approval. The wind through the shutters hummed not with ghosts, but with memory. One evening, after putting Ida Ruth to sleep, Maya wandered through the quiet house. The moonlight spilled across the floor, silver and soft, just as it had the first night she arrived. She paused in the doorway of the nursery. The crib stood beneath a window draped with white lace curtains. On the wall hung a framed photo, a young Ida May in a Sunday hat, smiling proudly beside the old farmhouse when it was new. Maya reached out, brushing her fingers over the frame. We're home now, she whispered. And this time, no one's taking it from us. She crossed to the crib and leaned over, resting her palm lightly on her daughter's chest. The tiny heartbeat thudded steady beneath her hand, strong and sure. Outside, the wind rustled through the fields, carrying the scent of rain and red earth. The same land her ancestors had once tilled, the same land they had refused to surrender. The land remembers, Maya said softly. And so do we. The house sighed, a long, contented sound that felt almost human, and the floorboards gave a gentle creak as though settling deeper into the soil that had always been its own. Maya smiled, kissed her daughter's forehead, and whispered into the dark, Rest easy, Ida May. We're home. As the moonlight drifted across the old wooden walls, the farmhouse seemed to breathe again, not with sorrow, but with peace. Let us know what you thought of this tale, full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and rate this story from 0 to 10 if it touched your heart. And if you enjoyed the story, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time.